No one in Texas could have predicted the chaos. The morning sun shone brightly, only to be swallowed by a relentless storm that transformed the state into a waterlogged battleground. In early September, a catastrophic deluge struck, marking one of the most destructive floods in Texas history. This narrative reimagines the events with original phrasing while preserving the scale and emotional weight of the disaster, complete with commentary to guide the reader through the story. In Houston, the day began with the familiar weight of summer humidity. By noon, however, the city was at the mercy of a monstrous storm system that crept in from the north. Torrential rain fell in sheets, dumping inches of water in mere hours. The city's drainage systems, unprepared for such an onslaught, gave way. Major highways like the bustling I-45 and the 610 loop became treacherous rivers. Vehicles bobbed helplessly in the current, their drivers scrambling for safety. News reports showed stranded motorists climbing onto their cars, some waving desperately for rescue as water lapped at their waists. In a southeast Houston neighborhood, resident Maria Alvarez recounted the terror of watching water invade her home. In just minutes, the floor was a lake, she said, her voice trembling as she described her son clinging to a floating couch. The family escaped, but their belongings were ruined, and they were forced to relocate. Houston, a sprawling metropolis, was brought to its knees. Beyond the city, the Texas Hill Country faced its own nightmare. The Guadalupe River, normally a serene lifeline for local communities, turned into a raging beast. Swelling over 25 feet in under an hour, it tore through the landscape, obliterating cabins, bridges, and small towns. At a children's summer camp nestled along the river, the flood struck with no warning. Cabins were ripped from their foundations, and young campers were swept into the chaos. Rescue teams worked tirelessly, but the losses were staggering. Dozens perished, thousands were displaced, and entire communities were left in ruins. This was no ordinary storm. It was a rare, century-defining catastrophe that left scars across Texas. As communities rebuild, a sobering question looms. When the next deluge comes, will Texas be prepared? Less than a week after a devastating flood, Houston faced another deluge on September 2nd. The ground, already waterlogged, could absorb no more when a new storm system stalled over the city. Torrential rains fell, turning streets into rivers within minutes. At the Interstate 45 and Wayside Drive underpass, floodwaters engulfed two vehicles, leaving only their roofs visible above the murky surface. Social media buzzed with videos from storm chasers in South Houston, capturing people abandoning their stalled SUVs in chest-deep water, struggling to reach safer ground. Major highways like I-10 and the 610 South Loop were submerged, paralyzing traffic. At the intersection of MLK Boulevard and Broadway, rising waters trapped drivers with no escape. Rescue teams worked tirelessly, guiding families through dangerous currents and setting up shelters in schools and community centers for those displaced. Neighborhoods such as Pasadena, Plant, Bel Air, Eastwood, Midtown, and the historic Fourth Ward were overwhelmed by floodwaters. For many residents, this was a grim repeat of the August 25th floods, but with even greater severity. The National Weather Service issued consecutive flash flood warnings, urging people to avoid roads, yet many were caught in the chaos. The events exposed Houston's ongoing struggle with extreme rainfall, disrupting lives and highlighting the need for improved infrastructure to handle such crises. Weeks earlier, on July 4th, Central Texas faced its own catastrophe. A powerful storm dumped over a foot of rain overnight across the Hill Country, with Kirk County seeing rainfall rates of up to 4 inches per hour. The Guadalupe River, swollen by the deluge, rose 26 feet in under an hour, becoming a destructive force. The raging river breached levees, demolished bridges, and swept away entire neighborhoods. Families camping along the riverbank awoke to find water surging beneath their trailers and cabins. By morning, cars were submerged, homes were destroyed, and RV parks in Ingram were carried downstream. In Carville, the damage was staggering. 300 homes were destroyed or rendered uninhabitable, power was cut to 5,000 residents, and streets became torrents. The most devastating loss occurred at Camp Mystic near Hunt, where floodwaters tore through a children's camp in the dead of night. 23 girls, aged 12 to 15, were swept away. Search teams later found 3 girls clinging to trees miles downstream, suffering from hypothermia but alive. Tragically, 3 others, Lainey Landry, Renee Smeister, and Sarah Marsh, did not survive. Their bodies recovered from the river by evening. The storm, initially a typical summer event, became one of Texas's deadliest floods, leaving behind grief, destruction, and lingering questions about preparedness and response. In the small town of Ingram, the floodwaters struck with terrifying force. For RV parks, filled with families enjoying a holiday weekend, were completely wiped out in a single night. Trailers were torn from their anchors, swept into deep ravines, and stacked like debris in the river's path. Many families were caught in the torrent, with some tragically lost to the raging currents. In Comfort, the Guadalupe River rose an astonishing 26 feet in under an hour, overwhelming a levee designed for much milder conditions. The flood's power demolished 2 critical bridges, isolating ranches and cutting off entire neighborhoods from aid. The local airport, vital for emergency operations, was submerged for nearly 2 days, halting rescue flights when they were most desperately needed. Further west, San Angelo and Tom Green County faced unprecedented rainfall, over 10 times their typical July totals. More than 10 inches of rain fell in a single night, turning streets into rivers and prompting urgent shelter-in-place orders from local police. Families in downtown areas found themselves stranded, surrounded by water with no way out. The flood's devastation extended beyond homes and infrastructure. Across Kerr, Kendall, Bandera, and Gillespie counties, the agricultural heart of the region was gutted. Over 700 head of cattle perished, barns were swept away, and feed silos were reduced to rubble. For ranchers, this was more than property damage. It was the loss of their livelihoods, with agricultural damages estimated at over $2 million. These rural communities, already struggling, faced a long road to recovery. From Carville to Comfort, Ingram to San Angelo, the story was the same. This was no ordinary flood. Towns were left isolated, without power, and mourning losses that would linger for years. The landscape of the hill country was forever altered, scarred by the ferocity of the waters. One resident, standing amid the wreckage, described the scene. "My entire street is underwater. Everyone's lives are just gone." As the floodwaters receded, the full scope of the tragedy came into focus. By the end of summer 2025, dozens of lives were lost. Children swept away in Kerr County, drivers trapped in Houston's flooded underpasses, and countless others caught in the chaos. Hundreds were injured, thousands displaced, and entire towns left unrecognizable. In Carville alone, over 300 homes were either destroyed or deemed unlivable, leaving families to rebuild from nothing. In the vast expanses of Texas's hill country, local ranchers tallied up heartbreaking losses. More than 700 cows swept away by raging waters, grain storage bins utterly destroyed, and entire barns reduced to rubble. The hit to farming operations alone soared past $2 million in damages. This kind of devastation isn't just about numbers. It's a stark reminder of how vulnerable rural economies are to sudden natural disasters, forcing us to think about better preparedness in agricultural zones. Down in Houston, the economic fallout was equally brutal, with shopping areas and office hubs forced to close their doors for extended periods. Initial assessments pegged the overall destruction in the hundreds of millions, but let's pause here. These figures underscore a bigger issue in urban planning, where sprawling cities like Houston often build in flood-prone areas without enough safeguards, amplifying the chaos when storms hit. Yet, the real cost defies easy calculation. It's the deep emotional wounds visible on the faces of those who lived through it. Take families similar to the Morales clan, who had to abandon everything as floodwaters invaded their living spaces. Or consider the agony of parents still searching for their missing daughters, last seen at a summer camp like Mystic. And ranchers, wandering empty pastures that once teemed with life, now eerily quiet. Commentary like this makes us reflect. In an era of increasing climate volatility, personal stories humanize the statistics, pushing communities to prioritize mental health support alongside physical rebuilding. But even in the midst of such despair, the unbreakable resolve of Texans emerged brightly. Ordinary folks linked arms to form human barriers, hauling unknown neighbors out of harm's way. Dedicated volunteers braved chest-high floods to deliver essentials to those cut off from help. Emergency havens sprang up in local schools, places of worship, and gathering spots, sheltering over 1,200 displaced individuals. This outpouring of solidarity is a powerful lesson in community strength. It's not government aid alone that saves the day, but everyday people stepping up, showing why fostering neighborly bonds is crucial in disaster-prone regions. Emergency teams, bolstered by units from the National Guard and Coast Guard, executed more than 40 aerial evacuations via helicopter and 60 water-based rescues within the initial day. These heroic efforts highlight the vital role of coordinated response systems. Without them, the toll could have been far worse, emphasizing the need for ongoing training and funding for first responders nationwide. The wounds from this catastrophe will linger for years, demanding patience and resources to mend. However, woven through the ruins are tales of bravery and kindness that affirm. When the elements unleash their fury, Texans band together rather than face it in isolation. This resilience isn't accidental. It's cultivated through shared history and values, a model for other states grappling with similar threats. The inundations of 2025 stand out as among the fiercest in Texas's record books. From submerged highways in Houston to the lethal rush along rivers like the Guadalupe, this season has vividly illustrated how fragile normalcy can be. But this isn't solely a Lone Star State tale. It's a national alert. With rising global temperatures and unchecked urban growth, severe weather events are bound to intensify, arriving with greater speed and proximity. The uncertainty isn't whether they'll come, but how soon. As commentators often note, ignoring this pattern invites repetition. Proactive measures like updated building codes and green infrastructure could mitigate future risks. For the people of Texas, the path ahead involves reconstructing dwellings, reviving jobs, and addressing invisible pains that no payout can erase. Still, this region has repeatedly demonstrated its toughness. Residents aiding one another, towns emerging from the deluge more unified and robust. And that brings us to a thought-provoking query. If a tempest of this magnitude struck your neighborhood next, are you equipped? Would your area withstand such a deluge? If this overview resonated with you, hit that like button, spread it around, and sign up for more updates to keep everyone in the loop. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What shifts are essential in places like Houston, throughout Texas, and nationwide to shield households from the inevitable next flood? After all, the tempests show no sign of easing, and we can't afford to lag behind either.